his arm and kind of pounded me to the ground. And I was shocked and overwhelmed and hurt. And I had made a whole story about what that experience was about. And it was good for quite a few years of therapy, quite frankly. Quite a few therapies, quite a good thing. And it wasn't until I had done lots of healing around that event and many other things that had happened to me in my childhood and to my siblings. But I hadn't seen the divine order. I hadn't seen how that there was some sense of order in this happening, that there was a purposefulness to it. So I went back and I looked at that situation and saw all the many blessings that there were for me. And certainly the biggest one that I had noticed before was that it was what had taken me into the realm of personal growth and spirituality. I wanted to heal. I didn't want to stay stuck in my anger and my frustration and my fear, quite frankly, of people. I was afraid of people. And I wanted to move past that. And also I needed to feel that connection, because in that moment I felt disconnected from this God that was supposed to protect me and from my family. So I saw that this became the catalyst in my life to have me discover all the wonderful tools of personal growth and change that I have studied. And one of the big ones also was craniosacral therapy, because I could feel that there wasn't something was wrong in my neck, in my head, and I could feel that, but I didn't know how to fix it. And also, I would go from feeling rather, joyous and excited and frantically trying to fix myself, which made me feel sort of manic in life, or I would feel depressed and hopeless, and I would swing from one side to the other. So when I found craniosacral therapy, it was the thing that began to bring my body into balance, to be able to release the hurt physically from my body, bring my mind in, and it became my life work. But I wouldn't have sought it out if I hadn't needed it for myself. So I was very grateful. And I began to see maybe it wasn't random. Maybe my father had just played his part. And I looked at what would have been the drawback if this hadn't happened to me. And I realized I probably would have been a very different person, because I was the youngest of 5, and I was spoiled. I was very self-indulgent. My mother doted on me, my sisters doted on me, and I think that was a balancing effect, because it kind of snapped me out of my self-indulgence, and I began to be aware of other people and what made people do the things they did. And that became my lifelong quest. And part of looking for the order in my life and helping people see the order in their life. Because a really interesting thing happens. In physics, when a positive charge and a negative charge become exactly equal, they neutralize each other. So now let's take that into the world of the mind. If we take something that was upsetting and it had a negative connotation, or we thought it was full of drawbacks, and then you found the benefits to it, the same thing happens. It just becomes neutral. It becomes a non-charge. And if you actually find enough benefits to it, you can move into the state of what? Gratitude. You can become grateful for the way, however that is playing out. Whether it's something big or small, you can have into that state of gratitude. And I think we've had those kinds of experiences, like, for example, breakups, right? When you break up with someone, especially if they break up with you, it's like, right? You think, you have to go back into your teenage years, but you remember that pang, and you think, nobody loves me, and it's this and it's that, and all of the story that goes on in your head. And then slowly over time, and sometimes you have friends help you and say, honestly, listen, this guy was this and this, or this woman was this and this. But you begin to realize, I kind of minimize myself around that person. I wasn't really doing what was important to me. I tended not to visit my family as much. I wasn't really spending time, and you come up with all the new benefits now of not being with that person. And don't you slowly bring it into kind of balance? We all have those kinds of experiences. So having that as a tool can be a really useful thing to remember that things do exist in quantum and that you can come up with the other side of it. One of the most profound examples I had of it was of a client of mine. I had known her family and treated her brothers and sisters and cousins and kids. And one day, about 7 years ago, I got a phone call saying that her son had been in a very serious biking accident. He had gone head first off the front of the bike, snapped his neck, and was a paraplegic. And could I come to the hospital and see him? Well, I could hardly speak when I got off the phone. Though I was a craniosacral therapist and I do treat things within the spine, it was way, way above my realm, of course. So I went to the hospital, and I remember walking in and seeing this 17-year-old boy in the bed. Oh, feel the emotion coming. And thinking, you know, what possibly could I do, or what has happened here? How can this be? And I spent some time with him and worked with some of the energy, and as I was leaving with his mother, she looked at me and she asked me, you know, how could this have happened? And though I had been on the spiritual path a long time, in those moments it's really hard to come up with an answer. And all I could say to her was that I felt a great love in that room, and that somehow that this was happening for a bigger reason than we could see in that moment. And I left and I got in the car, and quite frankly, I wept on the way home, because I couldn't see the order. I couldn't see. And I thought about my own son. So years passed, and I talked with her at times, saw other members of her family, and she was very preoccupied in his rehabilitation and getting him to try and have a meaningful life. And then I found this work through Dr. DeMartini and had studied it, about the fact that there is always a balance between the benefits and the drawbacks. Always a balance. And she phoned me and came for another session. And when she walked in the door, I realized that what she was looking for was still some sort of understanding about this. And I was deeply challenged to think, what was the benefit to her and to her son of this? Well, he began to create a life for himself, and we saw some of the more basic things, and that was how it had changed him. He was a much more compassionate person. He had drawn in lots of people into his life. He had met the woman, his girlfriend, and his deep love had been his physiotherapist. So we started to see some of those things that wouldn't have taken place if he hadn't have had this experience. He'd gotten closer to his brothers and sisters, and we went on. But it wasn't enough to have her feel any kind of shift about this. And she had people at different times say to her things like, particularly right after the accident, someone had mentioned to her that a woman she had met who had lost her daughter, who had actually died in a climbing accident, and came over to my client and had said, I would give anything to have my daughter in a wheelchair, because at least I would have her. But at the time, the grief was too great for my